Kim Day walked into the great hall of the Galactic Council. His black shoes made soft sounds on the smooth floor. The huge room was full of aliens from every corner of the galaxy. They sat in tall chairs that floated in the air. Their eyes watched him as he moved to the center of the room. He was not young anymore. Gray hair showed at his temples. Lines marked his face from years of hard work. But his back was straight, and his voice was strong when he spoke. "Honored members of the council," Kim Day said. His words echoed in the quiet room. "I come here today to speak for all humans in the galaxy. We have served with you for 300 years. We have fought beside you. We have shared our knowledge. We have called you friends." The alien leaders shifted in their seats. Some looked worried. Others seemed confused. They had expected anger today. They had expected humans to shout and make demands. But Kim Day's voice was calm. Admiral Park Sol stood behind him. She wore the blue uniform of the human space navy. Her medals caught the light from the ceiling. She had fought in 12 wars for the Alliance. She had saved alien worlds from pirates and invaders. Now she stood silent, her hands behind her back. Next to her was Li Na. The old scientist held a small device in her wrinkled hands. It contained 3 centuries of human research. Medical cures that could heal any disease. Engine designs that could move ships faster than light. Weapons that could protect entire star systems. All of it was ready to be given away. "We are leaving," Kim Day said. The words hung in the air like smoke. Not in anger, not in hate. We simply choose to go our own way now. A sound like wind through leaves filled the room as hundreds of aliens whispered to each other. Some looked relieved. Others seemed surprised. A few appeared worried, but they kept quiet. The Prime Minister of Velthak raised one of his 4 arms. His purple skin was darker than usual. "Ambassador Kim Day," he said in his deep voice, "this is very sudden. What has caused this decision? Have we offended humanity in some way?" Kim Day smiled, but it was a sad smile. "No offense was given, Prime Minister Korin. You have been fair according to your laws. You have treated us as equals in your courts. You have shared your planets and your trade. Then why?" asked the Speaker of Zenthos. Her bird-like head tilted to one side. "Why leave when there is peace? Why abandon what we have built together?" Admiral Park Sol stepped forward. She had been quiet for so long that her voice surprised everyone. "Because you do not need us," she said. "You never did. You wanted our ships when wars came. You wanted our scientists when problems were too hard. You wanted our soldiers when the fighting got bad. But you never wanted our ideas." The room grew very quiet. Even the soft humming of the air systems seemed loud. Li Na moved to the center of the room. She placed her device on the floating platform there. "This contains everything," she said. "Every cure we found, every invention we made, every weapon design we created to protect this alliance. We give it freely." "You cannot just leave," said General Thais of Altria. Her silver skin flashed with angry colors. "There are treaties. There are agreements. There are responsibilities." Kim Day nodded. "All treaties will be honored until their end dates. All agreements will be completed as written. All debts will be paid. We break no laws. We make no demands. We simply choose not to renew our membership when it expires in 30 days. But the trade routes," said the merchant prince of Kepler Station. "The shipping lanes through human space. The mining rights we have negotiated will continue as before," Admiral Park Sol replied. "Ships may pass freely. Trade will go on. We ask only that you respect our borders as we respect yours." The council members looked at each other. This was not what they had planned for. They had prepared arguments for angry humans. They had ready answers for demands and threats. But how do you argue with someone who asks for nothing? "Where will you go?" asked Prime Minister Korin. His voice was softer now. Kim Day looked up at the great window that showed the stars. "We have found new places to explore, new worlds to settle. We will make our own way among the stars." "Alone?" The question came from Dr. Vexhai of Zenthar. She had worked with human scientists for 50 years. "You will cut all ties with us?" Not all ties, Li Na said gently. We will remember our friends. Our universities will still welcome your students. Our hospitals will still treat your sick. But we will no longer be part of your political system. The debate went on for hours. Some council members tried to offer new deals. Others suggested changes to old laws. A few even offered humans more power in the alliance government. But Kim Dae's answer was always the same. Thank you. But we have decided. As the day ended, Admiral Park Sol walked to the Great Communications panel. She pressed a button and her voice went out to every human ship and station in the galaxy. This is Admiral Park Sol, she said. Operation Quiet Dawn is now active. All units are to begin withdrawal from Alliance space. Move in peace. Cause no trouble. Leave our posts clean and our duties complete. Across the galaxy, human ships began to move. They left their patrol routes and headed for the edges of known space. Space stations powered down and prepared for transfer to Alliance control. Human colonies packed their most important belongings and prepared for a great journey. But there was no panic. No rush. Everything was done slowly and carefully. Human doctors finished treating their patients before leaving. Human teachers completed their classes. Human engineers made sure all systems were working before they handed over control. The aliens watched in amazement. They had expected chaos. They had prepared for humans to take things that belonged to the Alliance. Instead, humans left gifts, medical supplies for hospitals, food for hungry colonies, fuel for ships that needed it. In the council chamber, Kim Dae gathered his papers. The vote was done. The Alliance had accepted humanity's withdrawal by a count of 847 to 12. Most members seemed happy to see the humans go. I do not understand, said Prime Minister Corrin as Kim Dae prepared to leave. You could have more power here, more influence. Why choose to have less? Kim Dae stopped at the door. He looked back at the alien leader. Power shared with friends is greater than power held alone, he said. But we were never really friends, were we? We were useful to each other. That is not the same thing. The old human ambassador walked out of the council chamber for the last time. Behind him, the alien leaders sat in silence. They had gotten what many of them secretly wanted. The uncomfortable humans were leaving. No more questions about old ways of doing things. No more suggestions for dangerous changes. No more reminders that there might be better ways to live. But as Kim Dae's footsteps faded away, some of them began to wonder if they had made a mistake. The galaxy suddenly felt larger and more empty than before. Outside the great building, Admiral Park Sol waited by a simple transport ship, not the grand vessel that had brought them here, but a small, quiet ship that would attract no attention. Is it done? She asked. Kim Dae nodded. It is done. We are free to go. Li Na looked back at the council building one last time. Do you think they will be all right without us? They will be fine, Kim Dae said. They have managed without humans before. They can do it again. But as their ship lifted off and headed for the stars, none of them mentioned the reports coming. From the edge of the galaxy, strange signals from empty space, ships that had gone to investigate and never returned, problems that might need the kind of solutions humans were good at finding. The humans said nothing about these reports. They had tried to warn the council before, but no one had listened. Now it was not their problem anymore. The ship disappeared into the darkness between stars, carrying the last official humans away from Alliance space. Behind them, the galaxy continued to turn as it always had. But something important had changed, even if most beings did not realize it yet. In the empty council chamber, Prime Minister Corrin sat alone. He stared at the device Li Na had left behind. All of human knowledge, given freely. But somehow it felt like they had lost more than they had gained. The silence in the Great Hall was complete now, and for the first time in 300 years it felt lonely. 5 years had passed since the humans left. Admiral Thys stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the stars through the great window. Her silver skin showed patches of dark blue, the color her people turned when they were afraid. Another signal has gone silent, reported her communications officer. The mining station at Helix 7. That makes 16 stations we have lost contact with in the past month. Thais closed her 4 eyes and tried to think. As the head of the Altrian Fleet Command, she was responsible for protecting the outer edges of Alliance space. But how do you fight an enemy you cannot see? The first reports had seemed like normal space accidents. A cargo ship here, a research station there. Space was dangerous, and ships were lost all the time. But then the pattern became clear. Something was moving through the galaxy, and everything it touched went silent. "Show me the star map," Thais ordered. A holographic display appeared in front of her. Red dots marked where ships and stations had disappeared. The pattern looked like a giant mouth taking bites out of the galaxy's edge. "It is moving toward the core worlds," said Commander Zelt. His scales were pale with worry. "At this rate, it will reach the first major colonies in 6 months. Thais studied the map. In the old days, she would have called the humans. They had a gift for seeing patterns others missed. They found solutions in impossible places. Admiral Park Sol had been her friend, and together they had solved problems that seemed hopeless. But the humans were gone now. They had left no forwarding address, no way to contact them. The Alliance had to face this new threat alone. "Send a message to all fleet commanders," Thess said. "We need every ship we can get, and call the Science Council. Maybe they can figure out what we are dealing with." Far away in a place between the stars, Dr. Yoon Bin was working in his laboratory. The human research station was hidden in a cloud of space dust, invisible to most sensors. Here, away from Alliance rules and regulations, human scientists could work on projects that had been forbidden before. Yoon Bin was studying the same star map that troubled Admiral Thiss. But he had more information. Human scout ships had been watching the galaxy's edge for years. They had seen the enemy coming long before the Alliance knew anything was wrong. "The readings are getting stronger," said his assistant, Dr. Kim Hay. She pointed to numbers on her screen. "Whatever these things are, they are definitely heading for the core worlds." Yoon Bin nodded. He had worked with aliens for most of his life before the humans left. Dr. Vexhai of Zenthar had been his closest friend in the old days. They had shared research and ideas for 50 years. Now they never talked. A soft sound told him that a message had arrived. When he opened it, he saw Vexhai's familiar face on the screen. The alien scientist looked older and more tired than he remembered. "My old friend," Vexhai said. "I know we have not spoken since your people left. I know. You have no reason to help us. But we are facing something terrible, and I do not know what to do." The message went on to describe the attacks. Ships found empty and cold, stations stripped of all metal and power, entire colonies where nothing was left but empty buildings. "Our weapons do nothing," Vexhai continued. "Our shields cannot stop them. They seem to eat energy itself. Please, if you know anything that might help." Yoon Bin stared at the message for a long time. Then he deleted it without sending a reply. The humans had tried to warn the Alliance about this years ago. They had detected strange signals from beyond the galaxy's edge. But the Council had said human fears were groundless. They had called the warnings typical human paranoia. Now, the threat was real, and the Alliance wanted human help. But help worked both ways, and the Alliance had forgotten that lesson. On his ship in deep space, Captain Han Sol watched the enemy through his sensors. The human exploration vessel, Pioneer's Dream, was hidden behind a dead moon, studying the creatures that the Alliance could not see clearly. They called themselves the Keth, though they did not speak in any normal way. They were made of living metal and energy, shaped like huge silver spiders with legs that could stretch across space. Each one was the size of a small moon, and they moved through space like fish through water. "How many do you count?" asked his first officer, Lieutenant Park Min. 47 in this group alone," Han Sol replied. "And this is just the advanced scouts. The main swarm is still coming." The Keth moved from system to system, consuming everything made of metal or energy. They stripped planets of their minerals, drained power stations, and left only dead rock behind. But they were not evil or greedy. They were just hungry, like animals looking for food. Han Sol had been watching them for 2 years. He understood now why they had come. The galaxy had grown too organized, too predictable. The Keth were drawn to order like moths to light. They came when civilizations became too stable, too set in their ways. "Captain?" said Communications Officer Lee Jun. "We are receiving distress calls from 17 different systems. The Alliance fleets are being destroyed." Han Sol listened to the panicked voices over the radio. Alliance commanders begging for help, asking for reinforcements that would never come. The Keth moved too fast and hit too hard. Traditional military tactics did not work against them. "Should we help?" asked Park Min. "Some of those ships have aliens we used to work with." Han Sol was quiet for a moment. Then he shook his head. "Our orders are to observe and gather information. Nothing more." It was a hard choice, but it was the right one. The humans had offered their help years ago, but the Alliance had not wanted it. Now they were learning the cost of pride. The battle for the Kepler system lasted 3 days. Admiral Theiss brought her entire fleet to defend the important trade hub. 200 ships formed defensive lines around the main planet. It was the largest space battle in Alliance history. The Keth came like a silver storm. They flowed through space, their metal bodies shifting and changing shape. Alliance weapons fired everything they had, but the energy just made the Keth stronger. The creatures ate the power from laser cannons and plasma guns, growing larger with each shot. "Fall back to defensive position 2, Theiss ordered. Her flagship shook as a Keth touched it, draining power from the shields. "All ships stop using energy weapons, switch to solid projectiles only," but it was too late. The Keth had tasted the fleet's power, and they wanted more. They swarmed over the ships like hungry insects, draining fuel cells and power cores. One by one, the great vessels went dark and cold. Theiss watched her fleet die around her. These ships had protected the galaxy for centuries. Now they were becoming food for creatures from the void between stars. "Admiral," called her communications officer, "I am picking up human signals. A small ship is approaching from the edge of the system." On her screen, Theiss saw a simple human transport ship. It was tiny compared to the battle around it, but it moved through the fighting without fear. The Keth seemed to ignore it completely. "Unknown human vessel," Theiss called over the radio. "This area is under attack. You must leave immediately." The human ship did not reply. Instead, it moved close to her flagship and sent a single message. "Your escape pod bay is open. You have 30 seconds." Theiss understood. The humans were offering to save her, but only her. There was no time to rescue her crew or her ship. She had to choose between her duty and her life. She chose duty. "Thank you," she said over the radio, "but I stay with my ship." The human ship waited for 10 more seconds, then moved away. Theiss never learned who had offered to save her, but she remembered the gesture for the rest of her short life. The Battle of Kepler was over in 6 hours. Of 200 Alliance ships, only 12 escaped. The rest were empty hulks drifting in space, all power and metal consumed by the Keth swarm. News of the defeat spread across the galaxy in hours. Panic followed soon after. If the Alliance's greatest fleet could not stop these creatures, what could? On his research station, Dr. Yoon Bin watched the news reports with sad eyes. He had seen this coming for years. The Alliance had grown too comfortable, too sure of themselves. They had forgotten that the universe was full of dangerous things. Dr. Vexhai sent 3 more messages, each one more desperate than the last. Other alien scientists joined her, begging for human help. But Yoon Bin did not answer any of them. The humans had learned a hard lesson from their time in the Alliance. You cannot help people who do not want to be helped. And the Alliance had made it very clear that they did not want human ideas or human solutions. Now they would have to find their own way to survive. The humans would watch and wait, ready to pick up the pieces when it was all over. But they would not save people who had refused to be saved. In the space between stars, the main Keth swarm continued its slow journey toward the galaxy's heart. Thousands of the metal creatures moved through the darkness, hungry for the ordered energy of civilization. They had done this before, in other galaxies, at other times. They would strip away the old, stagnant order and leave room for new growth. It was not cruel. It was necessary. But this time was different. This time, there were humans in the galaxy, and humans were very good at surviving things that should have killed them. The Keth did not know about humans yet. They had been sleeping when the strange, chaotic species arrived in this galaxy. They did not understand that some kinds of disorder were stronger than order. The news came at dawn on Altria Prime. General Bei Wan was drinking his morning coffee when the alert sounded through his small apartment. 17 star systems had gone silent overnight. The Keth swarm was moving faster than anyone had expected. Bei Wan was no longer in the military. When the humans left the Alliance, he had retired to a quiet farming colony. He grew vegetables and raised chickens, far from the politics and wars that had filled his younger years. But old habits were hard to break, and he still monitored Alliance communications. His computer chimed with an incoming message. The sender's name made him pause. Threxval of the Alliance War Council. Bei Wan had known him for 30 years. They had fought together against pirates and rebels. They had shared drinks and stories. But they had not spoken since the human departure. The message was marked with the highest security codes. Bei Wan almost deleted it without reading. But curiosity won. He opened the file and saw Threxval's familiar reptilian face on the screen. The alien looked much older than before. His scales were dull, and his eyes were tired. "My old friend," Threxval began, "I know you have no reason to. Help us. I know we have not earned your assistance, but billions of beings are going to die if we cannot stop these creatures." The message went on for 10 minutes. Threxval described the military situation in detail. The Alliance had lost half its fleet. Entire sectors were being evacuated. The Council was talking about surrender, even though no one knew how to surrender. To the Keth. "We need your tactical knowledge," Threxval said near the end. "We need human military thinking. Our strategies are not working. Please, if there is any friendship left between us." Bei Wan watched the message twice, then deleted it. He went back to feeding his chickens, but his hands shook slightly as he scattered the grain. 3 more messages came that day. 2 from other Alliance military commanders, 1 from Dr. Vex High of the Science Council, all asking for help, all desperate, all ignored. That evening, Bei Wan sat on his porch and watched the stars. Somewhere up there, people he had once called friends were dying. Ships he had once served on were being torn apart. Worlds he had helped protect were being consumed. But the Alliance had made their choice 5 years ago. They had decided they could manage without humans. Now they were learning the cost of that decision. On the other side of the galaxy, engineer Park Min was solving a different kind of problem. Her team was building a new type of space station in the shadow of a gas giant. The station had no metal hull that the Keth could consume. Instead, it was made from compressed asteroid rock and organic polymers. "The atmospheric processors are online," reported her assistant, Dr. Lee Jun. "We can start taking in colonists next week." Park Min nodded, but her attention was on the news feeds from Alliance space. The evacuation of Altria Prime had begun. The Alliance's founding world, home to billions of beings, was being abandoned. "It did not have to happen this way," she said quietly. Lee Jun looked up from his work. "You think we should help them?" "I think they should have listened when we warned them 3 years ago," Park Min replied. "We told them something was coming from the edge of the galaxy. We showed them the energy readings, but they said we were being paranoid." The human engineers continued their work in silence. Around them, the gas giant's storms raged in colors of red and gold. The station was hidden deep in the planet's atmosphere, invisible to most sensors. It was just one of dozens of secret human colonies being built in impossible places. While the Alliance ran from the Keth, humans were learning to live where the creatures could not follow. Gas giant atmospheres, asteroid fields, the hearts of nebulae, places too chaotic and unpredictable for the order-seeking Keth to understand. Counselor Lee Jun stood in the observation deck of New Sol Station, watching ships arrive from Alliance space. They were refugees, mostly. Families who had lost everything to the Keth swarm. Scientists whose research stations had been consumed. Merchants whose trade routes no longer existed. The human colonies were accepting them all. No questions asked, no payment required. Temporary. Housing was provided until permanent homes could be found. Medical care was free. Children were enrolled in schools. "Why are we doing this?" asked his aide, Captain Kim Sol. "These people's governments abandoned us. Some of them voted to make us leave." Lee Jun watched a ship full of Zenthari refugees dock with the station. He recognized some of the scientists from his old research days. They looked broken and afraid. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said. "We do not help people because they deserve it. We help them because they need it." The evacuation of Altria Prime took 6 weeks. It was the largest movement of people in galactic history. 15 billion beings had to be moved to safety before the Keth arrived. The operation required every transport ship in the Alliance, plus hundreds of volunteer vessels. The humans provided 30 ships. They appeared without fanfare, loaded with refugees, and disappeared back into the void. No Alliance officials thanked them. No news reports mentioned their help. They worked in silence, saving lives with no expectation of recognition. Captain Kim Ara commanded one of those rescue ships. Her vessel, the Mercy's Light, was designed for exactly this kind of work. It had medical bays, living quarters, and hydroponic gardens to feed thousands of people during long journeys. "Where are we taking them?" asked her first officer as they loaded another group of refugees. "The sanctuary," Kim Ara replied. "They will be safe there." The sanctuary was humanity's greatest secret. Hidden in the space between galaxies, it was a massive artificial habitat that could house millions of people. The humans had been building it for years, preparing for disasters exactly like this one. But even as they saved Alliance citizens, the humans maintained their silence. They did not offer military aid or strategic advice. They did not share their new technologies or reveal their hidden colonies. They simply rescued the helpless and disappeared. Admiral Park Sol watched the evacuation from her command ship. She had aged in the 5 years since leaving Alliance space, but her eyes were still sharp. Around her, a fleet of human vessels moved through space like ghosts, appearing only when needed. "The Alliance Council is requesting a meeting," reported her communications officer. "They want to negotiate a new alliance agreement." Park Sol almost smiled. "Tell them we are busy," she said. "Maybe in a few years." The truth was, the humans no longer needed the alliance. They had built something better in the darkness between stars, a civilization based on cooperation instead of politics, on growth instead of stability, on hope instead of fear. The Keth swarm reached Altria Prime on a Tuesday. The ancient world, home of the Alliance for 800 years, was empty except for a few automated systems. The creatures consumed the orbital stations and the planetary defense grid, but found little else to interest them. On worlds throughout the galaxy, Alliance citizens watched their capital fall. The symbols of their civilization, the Great Council, chambers, the Archive of Laws, the Monument to Peace, all became food for hungry metal spiders. Prime Minister Corin stood in his new offices on Sanctuary World Beta, watching the news feeds. His purple skin had faded to gray with stress and exhaustion. Around him, his government tried to function without a home. "The humans saved 8 million people from Altria Prime," reported his aide. "Our own ships could only carry 5 million. Corin closed his eyes. "Send them our thanks." "We tried, sir. They do not respond to our communications." Of course they did not. The humans had learned not to trust Alliance gratitude. They had been thanked many times before, usually just before being ignored or dismissed. Dr. Vexhai worked in a temporary laboratory on Refugee Station 1. Most of her equipment had been lost when her homeworld was evacuated. She was trying to analyze Keth remains, hoping to find some weakness the Alliance could exploit, but the work was slow without proper tools. Worse, she was alone. In the old days, she would have called her human colleagues for help. Dr. Yoon Bin had been brilliant at solving impossible puzzles. Together, they might have found an answer. Now she worked in isolation, surrounded by equipment that was second-rate and ideas that were not good enough. The Alliance's greatest scientists were scattered across refugee camps, trying to rebuild their lives instead of saving the galaxy. A soft chime announced an incoming message. Vexhai's heart skipped when she saw the sender. Dr. Yoon Bin. After 5 years of silence, her old friend was finally responding, but when she opened the message, there were no words, only a data packet containing research notes and technical specifications. Information about the Keth that human scientists had gathered over years of careful observation. The data was incredibly detailed. Keth biology, behavior patterns, energy consumption rates, reproduction cycles. Everything the Alliance needed to understand their enemy. But there was no explanation, no advice on how to use the information, just raw data, given without comment. Vex High stared at the files for a long time. It was like receiving a gift from a ghost. The humans were still watching, still learning, still caring enough to share knowledge. But they were not coming back to help in person. The message was clear: figure it out yourselves. On New Seoul Station, Counselor Lee Jun received daily reports about the war's progress. Captain Kim Ara stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking out at something that should not have existed. Before her stretched a fleet of 10,000 ships, but these were not warships. They were hospital ships, colony transports, mobile factories, and floating cities. Each one was filled with refugees from across the galaxy. "Final count, Captain?" asked her first officer, Commander Parkway. 47 million beings, Kim Ara replied. "Every species in the Alliance is represented. We even have 300 Keth prisoners that our science teams rescued from destroyed worlds." The fleet was hidden in the gravity shadow of a brown dwarf star, invisible to most sensors. It had taken 3 years to assemble, moving quietly through space while the galaxy burned. Now it was ready for the next phase of humanity's plan. "Send the signal," Kim Ara ordered. "Tell all colonies we are ready to begin." Across the galaxy, hidden human settlements received the message. What happened next would have amazed the Alliance if they had known about it. But humans had learned to work in secret, building wonders in places where others feared to go. On Titan Station, deep in the crushing atmosphere of a gas giant, engineer Park Min watched her creation come to life. The station was enormous, larger than most cities, but it had been invisible until now. Built from living coral that grew in the planet's chemical soup, it looked like part of the natural environment. "Atmospheric barriers are stable," reported Dr. Lee Jun. "We can begin accepting large numbers of refugees." Park Min smiled. The station could house 2 million beings comfortably, with room to grow. It was completely self-sufficient, drawing power from the gas giant storms and growing food in vast biological farms. The Keth could not touch it because it contained almost no metal and ran on organic technology. "Open the docking bays," Park Min said. "Let our guests come home." Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. On Ice Station Alpha, built in the frozen outer system of a dead star, human engineers welcomed 500,000 Zenthari refugees. The station's geothermal plants provided warmth and power, while underground farms produced food from recycled organic matter. In the Shadow Nebula, where dense clouds blocked all light, New Haven Colony operated entirely on sound and touch. Humans had learned to live without sight, developing technologies that worked in complete darkness. The colony housed species that breathed methane or hydrogen, providing homes for beings that could not survive on normal worlds. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Jiang Wei worked in the greatest of all human achievements, the Sanctuary. Built in the space between galaxies, it was a massive cylinder rotating slowly in the void. Inside, a complete ecosystem thrived under artificial suns. "Patient count?" asked her assistant, Dr. Kim Hay. 200,000 in the medical center, Jiang Wei replied. "Everything from radiation poisoning to Keth infection. We can treat them all." The Sanctuary's medical bay was a miracle of human engineering. It could heal diseases that had puzzled alien doctors for centuries, regrow lost limbs, and even repair damage to alien nervous systems. The humans had learned from every species they had ever met, combining knowledge in ways the Alliance had never imagined. But the most amazing thing about the Sanctuary was its population. 15 million beings from 400 different species lived there in peace. Humans had solved the problems that made different species fight: territory disputes, resource conflicts, cultural misunderstandings. They had done it by building big enough for everyone and smart enough to adapt to anyone's needs. Admiral Park Sol commanded the rescue fleet from her flagship, the New Dawn. Her ship was not built for war, but for hope. Its holds were full of cultural treasures saved from destroyed worlds, art, music, literature, and scientific knowledge from every civilization in the galaxy. "Ma'am," called her communications officer, "we are receiving a transmission from Alliance. Command, They want to know our intentions. Park Sol considered the message. The Alliance still existed barely. A few dozen worlds controlled by a government that met in borrowed buildings on refugee stations. They had been asking about human activities for months, but humans rarely answered. Tell them we are conducting humanitarian operations, Park Sol said. Nothing more. But it was much more than that. The humans were rebuilding galactic civilization from the ground up, creating something better than what had existed before. They were doing it quietly, without permission or politics, because they had learned that sometimes the best way to fix something was to start over. On the edge of Keith space, Captain Han Sol continued his dangerous work. His ship, the Pioneers, Dream, had been studying the creatures for 6 years now. He understood them better than anyone else in the galaxy. The main swarm has stopped moving, reported Lieutenant Park Min. They are gathering around the galactic core. Han Sol nodded. He had expected this. The Keth were not random destroyers. They had a purpose, and that purpose was almost complete. They had consumed enough ordered energy to trigger the next phase of their life cycle. How long before they begin breeding? Asked his science officer, Dr. Li Jun. 6 months, Han Sol replied. Maybe less. Once they start, there will be millions of them. The thought should have been terrifying, but Han Sol was not afraid. Humans had been preparing for this moment. They had found the Keth's weakness, learned their secrets, and developed a solution that would save the galaxy. But the Alliance would have to ask for help first. And asking meant admitting they needed humanity more than humanity needed them. Dr. Yoon Bin worked in his hidden laboratory, surrounded by quantum computers and genetic sequencers that would have made Alliance scientists weep with envy. His research team had made breakthrough after breakthrough in the years since leaving Alliance space. The solution is ready, announced Dr. Kim Hae. We can neutralize the Keth without harming them or anyone else. Yoon Bin studied the data on his screens. The answer was elegant in its simplicity. The Keth were not evil. They were just following their programming. Change that programming, and they would become helpers instead of destroyers. How long to implement? He asked. We can have the modification ready in 72 hours, Kim Hae replied. But we need access to the Keth hive mind to upload it. That meant someone would have to get very close to the creatures, close enough to touch their consciousness directly. It was dangerous work that would require precise timing and enormous courage. I will go, Yoon Bin said quietly. Sir, you are too valuable to risk, protested his assistant. Let someone else. No, Yoon Bin said firmly. This is my discovery, my responsibility. I will see it through. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening in every human colony. Scientists, engineers, doctors, and explorers were volunteering for a mission that could save everyone or destroy everything. They were ready to risk their lives for people who had rejected them. It was the most human thing imaginable. General Baewon received an unexpected visitor at his farm. Admiral Park Sol landed her shuttle in his vegetable garden and walked to his front door without ceremony. She looked older than when he had last seen her, but her eyes still held the same determination. Hello, old friend, she said when he opened the door. Sol, Baewon said with surprise. What brings you to my little corner of nowhere? We need to talk, she said, about the future of the galaxy. They sat on his porch, drinking tea and watching. The alien sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. For a while, they just enjoyed the peace and quiet. The Alliance is dying, Park Sol said finally. Not from the Keth attacks, but from loss of hope. Their people are scattered, their government is powerless, their military is broken. Baewon nodded. I have been watching the news feeds. It is sad to see. We could fix it, Park Sol continued. We have the technology, the resources, the knowledge. We could end the Keth threat and rebuild what was lost. But, Baewon asked, sensing there was more. But should we? Park Sol looked at him seriously. The Alliance chose to let us go. They made it clear they did not want our help or our ideas. Do we have the right to impose our solutions on them now? It was the question that had haunted every human leader for months. They had the power to save the galaxy, but using that power meant making choices for people who had rejected their right to choose. What does your heart tell you? Baewon asked. Park Sol was quiet for a long moment. "That we should help them anyway," she said. "Not because they deserve it, but because we are better than they were. Because mercy is stronger than justice, Bay." One smiled. "Then you already know what to do." The final phase of the human plan began 3 days later. Ships emerged from hidden bases across the galaxy, carrying technologies that seemed like magic to those who saw them. Hospital ships that could heal any injury, construction vessels that could rebuild entire worlds in weeks, and transport ships that moved faster than anything the Alliance had ever imagined. But most importantly, they carried hope. After years of running and hiding, the galaxy's people saw that someone was still fighting, still building, still believing in a better future. The humans had spent 5 years in exile, learning the most important lesson of all. Sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what really matters. What mattered was not power or politics or pride. What mattered was taking care of each other. Now they were ready to teach that lesson to the rest of the galaxy. The war did not end with explosions or surrender ceremonies. It ended with understanding. Dr. Yoon Bin floated in space, wearing a special suit that let him survive in the vacuum between stars. Before him stretched the largest Keth creature anyone had ever seen. A metal spider the size of a moon, its silver body pulsing with stolen energy from 1,000 consumed worlds. "I am ready," he said into his radio. His voice was calm, but his hands shook slightly as he approached the creature's massive head. Behind him, hidden in the shadow of an asteroid, Captain Han Sol watched through his ship's sensors. "Remember," Han Sol said, "you only get one chance. If the upload fails..." "It will not fail," Yoon Bin replied. He had spent 6 years studying these creatures. He understood them better than they understood themselves. The Keth creature noticed him approaching. Its huge eyes, each one the size of a building, focused on the tiny human floating toward its head. It could have destroyed him with a thought, consumed his life energy in an instant. But something about Yoon Bin made it curious instead of hungry. Yoon Bin placed his gloved hand on the creature's metal skin. The contact was electric, literally. Energy flowed between them, carrying information faster than light. For a moment, human and Keth shared the same thoughts. What Yoon Bin discovered in that instant changed everything. The Keth were not invaders. They were gardeners. For millions of years, they had traveled between galaxies, arriving when civilizations became too rigid, too afraid of change. They consumed the old order to make room for new growth. They were not evil. They were necessary. But something had gone wrong this time. The Keth had awakened too early, triggered by signals they did not understand. The galaxy was not ready for their gardening. There were still species that could grow, still civilizations that could change. The humans were proof of that. Yoon Bin uploaded his program into the Keth creature's mind. It was not a weapon or a virus. It was a gift of understanding. The program showed the Keth what humans had learned, that chaos and order could exist together, that growth came from embracing change rather than fearing it. The creature's eyes widened. Through the connection, Yoon Bin felt its surprise, its wonder, its relief. The Keth had been lonely for so long, carrying out their duty without anyone to explain their purpose. Now, finally, someone understood. The change spread through the Keth swarm like ripples in water. One by one, the creatures stopped consuming and started creating. They began to repair what they had damaged, to rebuild what they had destroyed. Metal and energy flowed from their bodies, forming new structures and healing wounded worlds. On his research station, Dr. Yoon Bin watched the transformation through his sensors. The Keth were using their power to restore the galaxy, but they were doing it in a new way. Instead of imposing rigid order, they were creating flexible systems that could adapt and grow. "It is working," reported Dr. Kim Hae. "The Keth are rebuilding, but they are making everything better than before." Yoon Bin smiled. Then he sat down at his communication console and composed a message to the Alliance. It was time to explain what had really happened and what it meant for the future. The message went out to every world, every ship, every station in the galaxy. In simple words, Yoon Bin told the story of the Keth and their purpose. He explained why they had come, why they had stopped, and what their presence meant. "The Keth are not our enemies," his message said. "They are teachers. They came because our galaxy had stopped growing, stopped changing, stopped taking the risks that lead to progress. They will leave when we prove we can grow on our own." The revelation stunned the galaxy. For months, everyone had seen the Keth as monsters to be destroyed. Now they learned that the creatures were trying to help, in their own strange way. Prime. Minister Corrin sat in his temporary office, reading Yun Bin's message for the 10th time. Around him, his advisors argued about what it all meant. But Corrin was thinking about something else, a conversation he had had with Ambassador Kim Day 6 years ago. "We were never really friends, were we?" Kim Day had said. "We were useful to each other. That is not the same thing." Now Corrin understood what the human had meant. The Alliance had treated humanity as a tool, not as a partner. They had taken human help when it was convenient and ignored human warnings when they were not. The price of that arrogance was measured in destroyed worlds and lost lives. Dr. Vexhai worked in her rebuilt laboratory, reading the data that human scientists had shared. Her old friend Yun Bin had kept his promise. The information was complete and freely given. But more than that, it was explained with the patience of a teacher helping a student. "Look at this," she said to her assistant, pointing to a diagram on her screen. "The humans found the solution 3 years ago. They could have ended the war at any time." "Why did they wait?" her assistant asked. Vexhai was quiet for a moment. "Because we needed to learn," she said finally. "We needed to understand what we had lost when we let them go. The reconstruction of the galaxy took 2 years. Working together, humans and Keth rebuilt entire star systems, created new worlds, and developed technologies that combined order and chaos in perfect balance. The Alliance found itself governing a civilization more advanced and more prosperous than anything that had existed before. But the real changes were deeper than technology. The war had taught every species the value of cooperation, the danger of rigid thinking, and the importance of listening to uncomfortable truths. Admiral Park Sol stood on the observation deck of New Altria Prime, watching ships from 100. Worlds working together in orbit. Human vessels worked alongside Keth creatures, alien freighters, and Alliance warships. The sight would have been impossible just a few years before. "It is beautiful," said a voice behind her. She turned to see Prime Minister Corrin approaching, his purple skin showing the blue patterns of respect. "Yes," Park Sol agreed. "It is what we always hoped for." Corrin stood beside her at the window. They watched in comfortable silence as a massive Keth creature gently lifted a new space station into orbit, while human engineers guided it into place with invisible force fields. "I owe you an apology," Corrin said quietly. "All of us do. We were fools to let you go." Park Sol shook her head. "You were not fools. You were afraid. Fear makes everyone do stupid things sometimes." "But you came back anyway," Corrin said. "You saved us even though we had rejected you." "We never left," Park Sol replied. "We were just waiting for you to remember that you needed us as much as we needed you." The final ceremony took place on the anniversary of humanity's departure from the Alliance. But this time, it was not a farewell. It was a homecoming. Ambassador Kim Day, now old and gray, stood once again in the Great Council chamber. But the room had changed. Instead of floating chairs arranged in rigid rows, there were comfortable seats placed in circles where different species could talk face to face. "6 years ago," Kim Day said, "we told you we were leaving. Today we asked to come home." The vote was unanimous. Every species in the Alliance, including several that had joined during the Reconstruction, voted to welcome humanity back. But this time, the relationship was different. Humans were not just members of the Alliance. They were partners in building something better. The new Alliance Charter was written by mixed teams of humans and aliens working together. It emphasized growth over stability, cooperation over control, and adaptation over rigid laws. The Keth were given a special role as advisors, helping to identify when societies were becoming too rigid and needed gentle encouragement to change. Chief Scientist Li Na, now ancient but still sharp, presented humanity's gift to the new alliance. It was not a technology, or a weapon, but something far more valuable, a philosophy of endless growth and infinite possibility. "We learned something in our exile," she told the assembled delegates. "We learned that the universe is always changing, always growing, always becoming something new. Our job is not to control that change, but to help it happen in the best way possible." Captain Kim Era commanded the first joint human-alien Keth exploration mission. Her ship, the New Beginning, was crewed by representatives of 20 different species and 3 Keth creatures who had volunteered to serve as guides to the unknown. Their mission was to explore beyond the galaxy's edge, to find new worlds and new forms of life. But more importantly, they would carry the message that growth and change were not things to fear, but gifts to be shared. "Course laid in, Captain," reported her navigation officer, a young human named Park Jun. "Destination, the large Magellanic Cloud. Take us out," Kim Ara said. Behind them, the Milky Way galaxy shone with new light, the combined glow of 1,000 species working together to build something unprecedented. As the ship jumped to faster-than-light speed, Kim Ara thought about the title of an old book she had read as a child. They let humans leave silently. No flames, no blame, just regret. The regret was real. Everyone felt it. The lost years, the wasted opportunities, the unnecessary suffering. But regret was just another word for learning, and learning was what made growth possible. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Now it was time to teach that lesson to the universe. In his small farmhouse, General Baywan received a final message from the Alliance. This time it was not a request for help, but a simple invitation. "Would you like to come home?"